Hello and welcome to the Your Way Disability Essay podcast, recorded from Adelaide, South Australia. We have worked long enough in the sector to know that people need a voice, and this podcast will offer that voice. The podcast will look at all topics NDIS related, the participants and families, providers and the supports. We will have guests to discuss topics that matter to them and guide you through any changes that you may need to know. So on today's podcast, we'll be talking with Christian and Mac about employment and their experiences living with a disability and trying to find a job. I think it's fair to say that it's difficult for most people when they leave school to, number one, know what they want to do and have that experience and be work ready. It's a very, very different environment to what we're used to. You know, we're told in school what time to be there, how to dress, what we're going to learn, and it's very well structured. And when we go into the world of work, it's very, very different. How was it different for you, Chris? And what was your experiences leading up to leaving school and finding your way? Or maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit more about yourself.
All right, so my name's Christian. I'm 22. So I live with my mum, my dad, my younger brother, and my dog, Roxy, who is a Jack Russell. I like playing video games, watching TV and movies, playing with like action figures, Lego and Nerf guns, and soon to be gel blasters. I like making people laugh. I like reading comic books as well and picture books. So I've been diagnosed with autism since I was about 3 years old. So I got an early diagnosis when I was 3 years old because I was also born very tiny. So I was born 3 months early, and I was the size of, or not much longer than, a biro pen. So I was in hospital for 6 months, obviously when I was a baby. And then it wasn't until when I was about 3, I got told that I had trouble like speaking. I'd repeat a lot of things or just wouldn't talk very much, wouldn't know how to spell. And then when I got diagnosed with autism, and I'm the only one, as far as I know, in my family that's actually been diagnosed with a disability. But I got told that I was able to have like something called early intervention, where I had speech pathologists. I also remember when I went to primary school ages ago. But I was quite lucky that I went to a primary school where most people knew that I had a disability, and it wasn't just me, some of my other friends as well. But a lot of people have said to me, they said if they didn't hear beforehand that I was diagnosed with autism, they said they never would have known. Primary school for me was a lot easier because it was, I guess it just was easier. But I remember in primary school that we had like adjusted classes, so we would be with mainstream kids, but we would have people like helping us and stuff, and like if it came to, like, say, doing math assignment, we wouldn't have to do all of it, we just had to do some of it, and we get graded off that.
Thanks, Chris. What about you, Matt? Can you tell us a little bit more about you?
Hi, I'm 20 years old. I mainly like accounting and YouTube kind of marketing kind of stuff like that. I like that kind of content creation, and I like creating music. I would say hip hop, kind of pop. Yeah, I want it to be a full-time kind of thing as an influencer and maybe win an area. Well, I'm currently studying accounting, just independently at home. Sometimes I go to the library. It's more of a stable job for me.
Yeah.
And then if music turns out, then I can do that instead. I did not have a good time at school. Primary school, I didn't really have many friends because I was very antisocial. And for the hobbies I liked, such as anime and video games and all that, I got bullied a lot. And it turned out to be a double-edged sword because I also made friends through certain hobbies.
Thanks, Mark. Chris, can you tell me a little bit about your experience when you was coming to the end of your school life, if you like?
So when I was in year 12, I went through a program called the State Transition Program, which is done by Barkuma. So what that program was about, it was about like teaching you, showing you like what types of jobs there are out there, how to get into one. And then for term 3 and 4, because it ran like school and we also got holidays as well, we went and did individual courses. So one of the things that I'm interested in is that I'm interested in computers. So once we finished up classwork and branched off into our individual courses for the State Transition Program, I ended up doing Certificate 1 in Information Technology, and that was really good. I made lots of friends and stuff, and we got to work with physical hardware compared to software stuff, which I never understood and don't understand.
So you've both had experience with DES providers or disability employment services since leaving school. What are your experiences and what have you experienced in this support that is readily available for people with a disability?
Pretty negative because I joined for about half a year and I only got 2 shifts at work experience.
Well, after I finished the State Transition Program, I did go on with Barkuma. But I left high school in a pretty unprepared way where I didn't have anything to go to. But I ended up joining Barkuma, staying on with them a year after I finished. But I was in a mindset where I wasn't ready. I didn't have a good... I finished unprepared and, to be honest, felt like I would go back to high school. So I remember I got offered jobs, but I turned 99% of them down, even though we did apply for some, because I wasn't ready to go into work and stuff like that, and found it a bit too daunting.
So, since leaving school and trying to find your feet, you've managed to utilise your NDIS funding to access groups. So, one of those groups that you've accessed is the Next Step programme at Autism SA. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and for anybody that might be interested in that?
So, when I first heard about Next Step, I was a bit sceptical. Because I thought it would be the type of program where you have to apply for a number of jobs and then they get grumpy at you if you hadn't applied for a lot and stuff. Joined Next Step on day 1 in the Netley group in 2019. And obviously, when you start something new, your first day, you're always a bit nervous, but then it's just you grow accustomed to it and stuff. And to me, it felt good. It felt so good that you didn't have to rush for anyone or anything. that you could do things at your own pace, and that the best thing about programs like Next Step is that there's no time limit. I found that when I finished like the state transition program, as soon as that support was like taken away, that's when I really struggled. It could have been stopped, but that's when I really struggled. So I was really glad to be able to join Next Step, and I wish it came. I wish, to be honest, Next Step came, or programs like Next Step came a year before.
I suppose that makes complete sense, feeling like you have that preparation into the world of work to ensure that you feel like you are ready to tackle that, because it's hard for everyone. And without those skills, it's very difficult and challenging not to feel overwhelmed in that situation. And with these groups, that it comes with, other, intrinsic factors. For example, friendships and relationships, and understanding how those mechanisms work, and feeling confident in a social setting within a work environment. I always remember watching this video clip. It was actually from the UK, and it was about somebody on the spectrum who is extremely talented and always struggled to find a job. But the way he could do the job fantastically well, but from a social aspect, he really struggled to get through that interview process and sell himself in a certain. I think he had something like 256 interviews before somebody came along and said, "You know what? We're going to interview you slightly different because we already know that you've got the skills to do the job," and it was really successful. Matt, when did you find out, or when did you know that you were on the spectrum?
Yeah, when I joined, I didn't know about my diagnosis until after high school.
So did you have a late diagnosis, or what was the age you got diagnosed?
It was officially free, but I didn't personally know until 18.
It must have been a really difficult time for you. How did you manage that? How did you kind of feel about this new revelation?
It was a bit difficult because I've only heard negative stigmas about it. But then I did some research and found out some of the smartest people, the richest person, Elon Musk, is associated with it. So it can't be all bad.
What's the takeaway skills then that you feel that you've learned from using your NDIS funding for a program like this?
Yeah, well, like the skills that I took from programs like Next Step is that. So before I joined, particularly like after I left high school, I found it very difficult to keep in contact with friends, and even when I did go back for visits, I was also like struggling when people asked me, "Oh, Christian, what are you doing with yourself at the moment?" And I would tell them that unfortunately that I was struggling at the moment and stuff like that, but they enjoyed having me back and stuff. So up until I joined Next Step. So like I started catching up with like school friends, a bit more that I hadn't seen for a long time. But then I also started to make good friendships in the Next Step, program, and like I learned how to write, like a resume and stuff. Learned some stuff about mental health that also I didn't know before that some people got diagnosed later with autism. Like one of the people in our group said she wasn't diagnosed till she was 21 years old, and that to me was a bit of a big shock because I had always thought if you were diagnosed with autism you'd be diagnosed at a younger age.
So, since leaving school and accessing your NDIS funding to support you in groups, what have your experiences been in work? What can you tell us about your experiences around work?
So, Before I started working, I was volunteering. So I started volunteering at one of the Salvation Army stores. But I was lucky enough with my desk provider that my desk provider would go with me to them. But it's really helpful on the first day when it's like you're just getting to know, like, you know, the routine and I guess it depends like where it's located. Like, luckily for me, I live close by, so like I could just catch like a bus or a tram.
For transport, I've got my learner's permit, but it's a lot cheaper by bus. But certain bus routes don't go to certain places.
You mentioned there that you're learning to drive, Mac, at the moment. How's that going, and how do you feel about driving on the roads in Adelaide?
It's really stressful driving, but through NDIS, I've gotten funding for specialised driving lessons.
That's interesting then. So you use your NDIS funding to support you with driving. Is that somebody who specifically works with people on the spectrum?
Not exactly. It's just someone that understands that and isn't going to lash out at me when I do something wrong.
Can you tell us a bit about your experience in employment then, Matt?
I started at 12 because I wanted to go to a anime convention, but I had to fund that. So I worked at my dad's timber mill. I got $10 an hour just cleaning around the whole site. It was exhausting 8-hour days.
So is that a job that you would like to do in the future then?
Definitely not. I was going to pay for my thing. I was willing to do it. I did some national tree planting and just helping the environment and stuff like that.
So do you guys disclose your diagnosis to your prospective employers?
Me personally, yes, because my desk provider pretty much told me to. It's the same thing with the driving lessons, because if I don't disclose it, and they might lash out at me and I might have a breakdown. There is some leniency, but of course there's going to be some negative stigma attached to it, and it's not a good what could I say, key indicator for a business to have.
I guess I really have to, like, it gets explained to like the bosses or the managers. So, because usually like I said, my desk provider would go, my job coordinator from my desk provider would go with me, and so it's usually they'd have to disclose it. So, but I don't see that as a problem, and I've even had people at former workplaces and stuff say if they hadn't said that I was autistic, they just wouldn't have known.
So where would you like to be in, let's say, 5 years' time?
Certainly would like to travel the world, obviously once COVID settles down, because I've never been outside Australia. In 5 years, have a house, have a car.
For me, I would just like stable accounting job, just to play it safe. And then to be really ambitious, I want to do, let's say, I want to be an influencer and do music and all that, content creation, and maybe perform with Kid Laroi.
What would you say that some people misunderstand about you?
People sometimes misunderstand my sense of humour. I have a bit of a dry sense of humour, as Mac well knows.
I can attest.
Yeah, Mac can definitely attest to that. I have a very dry sense of humour. That I'm a stirrer. So sometimes some people can misunderstand me, like my sense of humour. Sometimes they just don't. Sometimes they don't understand like what the joke or the punchline is, and I have to explain.
Have you got any jokes for us today?
Yeah. What do you call an alligator in a vest? An investigator.
Same question to you, Matt. What do people misunderstand about you?
It's in a spectrum of I'm either Raymond, a genius Steve Jobs, or I'm useless. Well, once I do my music career, I might be able to validate myself and say genius.
So the media have a huge influence on the perception of people on the spectrum too.
I guess mainstream media like movies and stuff like that. But me personally, I want to be an advocate as well.
I also think that with like what Max just said with mainstream media, like movies and stuff, like when they tend to focus on autism, they only tend to focus on like the types of people who have autism, who are severe and don't need to have care for the rest of their life. So I think. I think it's good that like they explore that option, but I think it would be good if they explore, the other, the other side. And sometimes people do misunderstand like my diagnosis, but thankfully, when I was working at the library, thankfully I had a workplace culture that actually understood. We had someone there who had autism, right. And so we were like inclusive.
And this is why podcasts like this are so important, because people need to understand there's a varied, unless you have lived experience, the perception is very different to the reality. And it goes, if we go back to a quote from Dr. Stephen Shaw, where he says, if you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism, because everybody's different and it is a spectrum, and the public persona or the extreme persona of autism is widely publicised, but not everything in between. What makes you feel inspired?
I guess like comedy makes me feel inspired. Although I went to my first protest, not last year but the year before, so 2020. So basically what happened is that my friend's school, called Springbank Secondary College, was on the verge of being shut down. Yeah. So me and my friend... and my friends, like we all came together and formed a campaign. We went and did a protest on a Saturday morning in front of Parliament House. That was really fun. So my friend spoke, and then there was this woman who was an autism advocate, but she really struck a chord. And the good news is that a week after the Parliament House protest, we were on the news and everything. The school stayed open.
Wow. What about you, Mike? What inspires you?
I'd say Kid Leroy. He's proved that you can make it in Australian hip hop, because we're not well known for that at all. And also, not exactly a friend, but a student from my high school, Sar Ellie. He's done really well in music, and just seeing his character development, his progression, and how he's got thousands of followers, and he's actually made a career out of it, inspires me to do it as well.
Okay, if you had $100 million to spend on the disability sector, what would you spend it on?
I'd spend it on education, because in my experience, the way the system is designed, and I found this out the hard way, is that it's designed for people who end up going to uni, TAFE, an apprenticeship or a job. If you feel like you're unprepared, it feels like you're left behind. So I personally think that if you don't succeed at something, try again until you succeed. So I think grade repetition is a good thing if it's used correctly, to be able to help people who are transitioning from school to work.
I would say funding for people who are like me, high functioning autism. Most of the funding goes to people who do deserve it more, who are low functioning. But for me, whenever I go to NDIS, I don't really get much support, because there are people who need it more than me. So it's hard to get support in that way.
Well, that concludes our chat with Christian and Mac today here on Your Way Disability SA podcast. I just wanted to thank you guys as well for coming in and being very open and honest about your experiences and your personal life. Hopefully there's people out there that can be inspired by you and your journeys, which is still at the very start, but hopefully you will be able to inspire others, and you'll give some of the advice that you've given there. And maybe there's some politician out there with $100 million that wants to spend it in an area.
Maybe I could make $100 million.
There you go. There you go. Keep your ambition alive, boys. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks very much for that.
Bye.
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 Thank you.